afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. My name is Khalid Azhari. I'm former president of this club, and I have the honor to moderate this event today. Our guest speaker is very well known and very in the news, very popular in the news now. Chairperson, Ms. Tomoko Tamura. She is the chairperson of the executive committee of the Japanese Communist Party. It's a very challenging job at these times. With the Jiminto, the ruling party, has very overwhelming numbers in the House of Representatives. It's total about 259 for Jiminto, and his ally Komeito, 32, so total is 291. Meanwhile, the Communist Party has 10 members in the House of Representatives. It's very small members. I think it was 20 members a few years ago. So now the popularity is going back, but Chairman Tamura might try to switch this trend and bring back voters in light of the scandals raging in the Japanese Liberal Democratic Party. Other parties also have good numbers, so we really wonder why the Communist Party is still not rising in Japan in terms of popularity in the voting boxes. And maybe the change of the leadership, especially having a woman at the head of the party, might change a little bit. Now there's a lot of talk in Jiminto about having Foreign Minister Kamikawa. She's very popular in the surveys to succeed Prime Minister Kishida. So now are we going to see like a change in the gender of the Japanese politicians? That's a very good question that Chairman Tamura will talk about. She is the first female leader of Japan's Communist Party. She will reveal her plans for the JCP Communist Party and also comment on the Kishida administration and political issues. Tamura-san, she has been member of the House of Councillors since 2010 and has criticized Jiminto and also its policies. In January January, she replaced Kazuo Shii as a chairman, and who held the post for 24 years. Basically, the Communist Party has been in the opposition forever, almost, and we don't know if there will be alliance in the next elections among political parties, especially the opposition, with the participation of the Communist Party. That will be the news of the day then if it happens. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome our guest speaker. Thank you very much.
スピーチの機会をいただきましてありがとうございます。日本共産党の田村智子です。
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Tamura Tomoko of the Japan Communist Party.
はじめに簡単な自己紹介をいたします。私は1985年20歳で日本共産党に入党しました。
So first of all, please allow me to briefly introduce myself. I joined the Japanese Communist Party in 1985 at the age of 20.
議員になろうと思ったわけではありません。日本共産党が核兵器廃絶のための国際条約を作ろうと呼びかけている。このことを知り、私も核兵器廃絶へと世界を動かす一人になりたい、そう思ったのです。
However, I did not intend at that time to become a member of parliament. I learned that the JCP was calling to create an international treaty to abolish nuclear weapons, and I wanted to be also part of this global movement for nuclear weapons abolition.
2017年に核兵器禁止条約が誕生したことは私の大きな喜びです。そして日本共産党の代表が条約採択の国連の会議に参加し、歴史的瞬間を会議参加者とともに喜び合ったことは私たちの大きな誇りです。
When the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons was created in 2017, it was a great joy for me. And we were also enormously proud that representative of the JCP was participating in the meeting at the UN which adopted this treaty and was able to share in the joy at this historical moment together with the other meeting participants.
今、被爆者をはじめとする市民社会と核兵器を持たない多くの国々が国際政治の主人公となり、核保有大国を包囲し始めています。ここに世界史の進むべき道、本流があります。
Now, civil society, led by the Hibakusha or the atomic bomb survivors, together with many countries which do not possess nuclear weapons, have now become the protagonists in international politics and are starting to encircle the nuclear powers. This is the mainstream, the path that history of the world should follow.
日本共産党は人類史の本流を前に進めようという政党です。今年で創立102年を迎えます。戦前、激しい弾圧の下で国民主権、侵略戦争反対を貫き、戦後も平和と民主主義を前進させるために政治と社会の改革に挑み続けてきました。
The JCP is a party which moves forward with this mainstream of human history to make progress. This year marks the 102nd anniversary of our founding. Before the war, it stood despite severe repression for national sovereignty and against the war of aggression. And following the end of the war, it has continued to take up the challenge of both political and social reform to advance peace and democracy.
この改革の党の委員長として、また102年の党の歴史で初めての女性委員長として、日本の政治をどう改革するのか、2つのテーマで私のビジョンをお話しします。
So as chair of this party of reform and as the first female chair in the party's 102-year history, I would like today to speak about my vision of how to reform Japanese politics around two main themes.
1つ目は、財界の利益最優先からの転換、人権尊重の経済システムへの改革です。
The first is shifting from the prioritization of business interests to instead reform into an economic system that respects human rights.
このテーマでお話しするにあたり、まず自民党の裏金事件について述べなければなりません。これは自民党の組織的犯罪です。政治家個人、政党の派閥ともに企業献金を受けることは法律で禁止されています。しかし自民党は政治資金パーティーによって多くの企業から脱法的に金を集め、さらに収支報告書への意図的な不記載という違法行為を組織的に行っていました。
So in speaking of this subject, first I must speak about the LDP's slush funds affair. This is an organized crime by the LDP as a party. Both individual politicians and political factions are prohibited by law from accepting corporate donations. However, the LDP systematically collected money from numerous companies through political fundraising parties in an illegal manner, and also committed the illegal act of deliberate omission of this from income and expenditure reports.
これまで日本で起きた数々の汚職事件は、特定の政治家と特定の企業による事件であり、その政治家が断罪されることで、自民党は何とか事を収めてきました。しかし今回の事件は、自民党丸ごとと財界丸ごとの癒着であり、それゆえに自民党は事実解明から逃げ回っています。国民の怒りは沸騰しています。もはや自民党には政権党としての資格はありません。
In the past, the LDP has somehow managed to get away with many corruption cases here in Japan because these cases involve specific politicians and specific companies, and these engaged politicians were condemned. However, this current case is collusion between the LDP as a whole and the business world as a whole, and this is the reason that the LDP is now running away from making the facts of this situation clear. Yet public anger is boiling over, and the LDP cannot be now said to be qualified to be the governing party of Japan.
この事件の発端は、日本共産党の機関紙、新聞赤旗によるスクープ報道でした。新聞赤旗がなければ、今も裏金は裏のままでした。自民党を窮地に追い詰めている政党として、私たちはこの事件の事実解明とともに、自民党を 政権与党から下野させ、新しい政治へ転換するために奮闘しています。
The uncovering of this scandal was triggered by a scoop in the JCP's official newspaper, the Shinbun Akahata. Without this newspaper and its reporting, this situation would not have come to light even today. As a party driving the LDP into the corner, we will fight hard to uncover the facts of this case, to force the LDP out of power, and to transform Japan into a new political system.
私は自民党丸ごとと財界丸ごとの癒着と述べましたが、これは日本の政治の歪みに直結しています。日本経団連など財界大企業は目先の利益のために企業献金と一体に政策要求を行い、自民党政治はこの要求に忠実に応えてきました。
So I mentioned the collusion between the LDP and the financial worlds on the whole, and this is directly linked to a distorted situation in Japanese politics itself. Keidanren, or the Japan Business Federation, and other business organizations and large corporations make policy demands in tandem with corporate donations for their own immediate profit. And the LDP politics has faithfully responded to these demands.
法人税の税率引き下げを繰り返し、消費税の税率を3回も引き上げました。働く人の権利を守る規制を緩め、人件費コストカットを推進しました。長時間労働の規制緩和、非正規雇用を増やす労働法制の改悪などです。
The corporate tax rate was repeatedly reduced and consumption tax rate raised 3 times. Regulations protecting workers' rights have been loosened and labor cost-cutting promoted, such as the deregulation of long working hours and reforming labor legislation for the worse to increase non-regular employment.
これらの政策によって、この30年間で大企業の利益は11倍にも増え、株主への配当金も大きく増えました。しかし賃金は上がらず、内部留保となり、大企業の内部留保は555兆円、GDP にも匹敵するほど膨張しています。
These policies have led in the past 30 years to an 11-fold increase in profits for large companies and a large increase in the dividends paid to shareholders. However, wages have not risen during this time, and these profits have instead been internally retained. These internally retained earnings of large corporations have ballooned to 555 trillion yen, equivalent to the GDP.
大企業と富裕層は巨額の利益を得る。しかし、労働者の実質賃金は下がり続け、個人消費は冷え込み、経済は長期停滞から抜け出せない。この行き詰まりを打破するには、これまでの経済政策の転換が必要です。
Large corporations and the wealthy are reaping huge profits. However, workers' real wages continue to fall. Consumer spending is cooling, and the economy is stuck in a long-term stagnation. To break this deadlock, a change in existing economic policy is needed.
その鍵は、国民の生活と権利を保障する経済システムを作ることです。私たちはこの立場で、経済再生プランという総合的な経済政策を提案しています。
The key to this kind of change is to create an economic system that guarantees people's livelihoods and rights. And from this standpoint, we have proposed a comprehensive economic policy, which we call our economic revival plan.
飛ばしますね。国民の暮らしと人権を守ってこそ、経済を立て直すことができるという政策です。具体的な政策をいくつか紹介したいと思います。
The policies which this entails aim to rebuild the economy through protecting the livelihoods and the human rights of the people, and I would like to introduce some specific policies under this.
まず、非正規ワーカーの待遇改善です。日本における非正規雇用の割合は約4割。他国との比較でも極めて高い割合です。
First is improving the treatment of non-regular workers. The proportion of such workers in Japan is approximately 40%, which is extremely high compared to other countries.
この非正規雇用の労働契約は3ヶ月とか6ヶ月とか長くても1年など短期契約が大多数です。実際には多くの労働者が契約更新によって長期に働いていますが、その場合も正規雇用との賃金格差は大きく、管理職にはなれないので、スキルアップの機会にも大きな格差があります。
The majority of labor contracts for such non-regular employments are short-term contracts, lasting, for example, for 3 or 6 months, or at the most for 1 year. But in practice, many workers actually work for much longer periods through renewal of their contracts. However, even in these cases, there is a large wage gap between regular employment and those who are non-regular workers. And there is also a large gap in opportunities for skill development, as these non-regular workers cannot hold managerial positions.
非正規雇用の約7割は女性です。妊娠・出産を理由に解雇してはならないという法律がありますが、妊娠を報告すると別の理由で契約更新をしないというやり方が横行し、女性たちの人権が踏みにじられています。
Around 70% of non-regular employees are women. And although there is a law which prohibits dismissal on the grounds of pregnancy or childbirth, the human rights of women are being undermined by the widespread practice of companies failing to renew their contracts for reasons given which are other than these when women report that they are pregnant.
不当な雇い止めを禁止し、安定した働き方にする。労働契約は無期限を原則とする。同一価値労働同一賃金で格差を是正する。待遇での差別をなくす。などのルールが必要です。これらは生活の安定、将来に希望を持って働くための最低限のルールです。
Prohibiting unjustified termination of employment and ensuring a stable way of working. In principle, labor contracts should be indefinite. Disparities should be reduced through equal pay for equal work or work of equal value. Rules are needed, such as, for example, eliminating discrimination in the treatment of workers. And these are the minimum rules required to ensure stability in life and people to have hope for how they can work in the future.
正社員では長時間労働の規制が必要です。1日8時間、週40時間を上限とする労働時間規制を厳格にして、働く人すべてに自分の時間、家族との時間を保障する。これは女性に家族的責任を重く負わせる日本社会を変える上で不可欠の改革です。
And for regular or full-time employees, there must also be reform. For example, the regulation of long working hours. There should be an introduction of strict regulations on working hours with an upper limit of 8 hours a day and 40 hours a week in order to guarantee all workers' time both for themselves and for their families. This is an essential reform to transform Japanese society, which now places heavy familial responsibilities on women.
男女賃金格差の是正も重要です。日本では約40年前に事務職の募集は女性のみなどの男女別採用を法律で禁止しました。
Correcting the gender pay gap is also important. In Japan, around 40 years ago, a legal ban on gender-based recruitment was introduced. For example, things such as recruiting only women for clerical positions.
ところが大企業は女性のみ募集していた職種を一般職、男性が多い職種を総合職と名前を変え、男女ともに求人募集をするけれども、給料の安い一般職はほとんどが女性という人事を行うようになりました。
However, after this, large companies changed the names of positions which used to be open only to women to general positions or ippanshoku, and those that are predominantly male to career track positions or sougoshoku, and started recruiting for both men and women for both of these positions. However, the situation remains that these general positions with lower salaries are mostly filled by women.
このような間接差別を禁止しなければなりません。企業に対し男女賃金格差のデータ公表、格差の要因分析と格差是正の計画策定を義務付け、政府が監督することが必要です。
Such indirect discrimination must be prohibited. Companies should, for example, be obliged to publish data on the gender pay gap, to analyze the causes of this gap and formulate a plan to correct it. And the government should be responsible for monitoring this.
世界の中でジェンダーギャップ指数が改善しない異常な国、それが日本です。今、ジェンダー平等を求める市民の運動は大きく広がっています。ジェンダー平等社会へ日本を直ちに動かす、私の大きな挑戦です。
Japan is an anomaly among countries in the world in that its rank in the gender gap index has not improved. Yet citizens' movements for gender equality are spreading widely now in Japan. Moving the country immediately towards a gender equal society is my great challenge.
2つ目のテーマは平和に関わるものですが、用意したスピーチの前に本日採択された国連安保理決議について一言述べます。
And the second point I would like to speak about is related to peace policies. Before going into my prepared remarks, I would like to make a comment on the resolution which was adopted at the United Nations Security Council today.
ガザの人道危機は極めて深刻であり、緊急に打開が求められます。
The humanitarian situation now in Gaza is extreme. It is severely worrying, and we need to have an immediate breakthrough in order to improve this situation.
ラマダン中とはいえ、安保理が初めて即時停戦の決議を採択したことは一歩前進です。
The fact that even now during Ramadan, the UN Security Council was able to, for the first time, adopt a resolution which does call for an immediate ceasefire is a step forward.
イスラエルはこの決議に従わなければなりません。
Israel must follow this resolution.
アメリカも決議を遵守させるようイスラエルに働きかけるべきです。
And the United States should also make efforts to encourage or ensure that Israel does follow this resolution as well.
即時停戦を実現し、恒久的停戦に進むことを強く求めるものです。
We call strongly both for the implementation of this immediate ceasefire and also for this to be changed into a permanent ceasefire as well.
今、日本で求められる改革、アメリカ言いなりからの脱却、そして日本国憲法を生かした外交への転換です。
And as for Japanese policy, what is required now, the kind of reform here in Japan, is first of all to break away from a policy which just follows the United States and to shift instead to diplomacy which utilizes or is based on the Japanese constitution.
こんなアメリカ言いなりでいいのかという私たちの問いかけは今多くの国民の中に響いています。
The question of our party as to is it really okay for Japan just to follow the United States as it is now is a question which is resonating with many citizens.
唯一の戦争被爆国でありながら核兵器禁止条約に背を向けて締約国会議へのオブザーバー参加も拒否する。
Despite being the only country which was A-bombed during wartime, Japan is turning its back on the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, refusing to even participate as an observer in the treaty's meeting of states parties.
在日米軍のオスプレイは墜落事故の原因を明らかにしないまま飛行訓練を再開し、日本政府はこれにいいダクダクと従っています。
U.S. military Osprey aircraft here in Japan have resumed flight training without disclosing the cause of previous crashes, and the Japanese government is complying with this.
米軍横田基地で有害物質 PFAS の大量漏洩が明らかになっても立ち入り調査を拒否する。これが主権国家の姿でしょうか。
Even when a massive leak of toxic PFAS was revealed at the U.S. Yokota Air Base, refuses to allow an on-site investigation. Is this really the behavior of a sovereign state?
このアメリカ言いなりの政治は日本の戦後の在り方をも大きく変容させています。
This politics of following the United States has also drastically transformed the post-war state of Japan.
集団的自衛権の行使容認、敵基地攻撃能力の保有、軍事費の2倍化、殺傷武器の輸出解禁、そして戦闘機の輸出解禁も本日閣議決定されました。
The cabinet has also today decided to allow the exercise of the right of collective self-defense, to possess enemy base attack capability, to double military expenditure, to lift the ban on the export of lethal weapons, and to lift the ban on the export of fighter jets.
これらはすべて歴代自民党政権が憲法9条があるからできないとしてきたことばかりです。
These are all things that successive LDP governments have said that they could not do because of Article 9 of the Constitution.
岸田政権は日米軍事同盟の強化が抑止力となり日本を守ると主張しますが、抑止力とは恐怖を与えて相手を思いとどまらせるということです。これでは相手も恐怖で応え、軍事対軍事の悪循環を加速させ、北東アジアの軍事的緊張を高め、安全保障どころか国民を戦争の危険にさらすことになるでしょう。
The Kishida government claims that strengthening of the Japan-US military alliance will serve as a deterrent and will protect Japan. Yet deterrence means that fear is used to dissuade the other side. This will only cause the other side to respond with fear, accelerating the vicious cycle of military versus military, increasing military tensions in Northeast Asia, and making the people of Japan not more secure, but rather placing them under the risk of war.
日本はアジアへの侵略戦争の反省に立ち、戦争をしない国、戦争に加担しない国、武器輸出は行わない国として国際的な信頼を築いてきました。日本国憲法に基づくこの信頼こそが日本の安全保障の土台です。
Based on regret regarding its past war of aggression against Asia, Japan has built international trust as a country that does not wage war, is not complicit in war, and does not export arms. It is this trust based on the Constitution of Japan which has formed the foundation of Japan's security.
私は日米軍事同盟を絶対視した軍事力強化から憲法9条を生かした外交へと政治の転換を目指します。憲法9条を生かした外交とはどういうものか。私たちは ASEAN の外交努力に注目し、ASEAN と協力して戦争の心配のない東アジアを作る外交ビジョンを提言しています。
I aim for a transformation in politics, from strengthening military power with an absolute focus on the US-Japan military alliance, to instead diplomacy that is based on Article 9 of the Constitution. Well, what does this kind of diplomacy mean? We have paid great attention to the diplomatic efforts of ASEAN and propose a diplomatic vision to create an East Asia free from the fear of war in cooperation with ASEAN.
昨年12月、私は ASEAN 本部を訪問し、最新の ASEAN の外交努力を学び、私たちの外交ビジョンについて意見をお聞きしてきました。
Last December, I visited the headquarters of ASEAN in order to learn about their latest diplomatic efforts and to hear their views on this diplomatic vision.
ASEAN は紛争の平和的解決という東南アジア友好協力条約を土台に粘り強い努力で対話の習慣を築き、今では年間1500回もの会合が行われているということです。
ASEAN has built up a habit of dialogue through persistent efforts based on the Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation in Southeast Asia, which has the peaceful resolution of disputes at its foundation. And now more than 1,500 meetings of ASEAN are held annually.
平和と安定こそ繁栄の土台という言葉も繰り返しお聞きし、ASEAN の経済成長が平和の地域協力と一体で進んだものだと確信しました。
I heard repeatedly the phrase that peace and stability are the foundation of prosperity, and am convinced that ASEAN's economic growth has proceeded in tandem with regional cooperation for peace.
ASEAN と協力してすでにある東アジアサミットを活用発展させ、東アジア全体を戦争の心配のない地域にする。この外交ビジョンについては4月17日、国会内で C 和夫議長が詳しくお話をいたします。各国大使館からの参加も予定されていますので、ぜひご注目ください。
In cooperation with ASEAN, we will utilize and develop the already existing East Asia Summit to make the whole of the East Asia a region free from war. This diplomatic vision will be discussed in detail by Kazuo Shi, the chair of the JCB's Central Committee, in the Diet on April 17. Embassies of various countries are also expected to attend at this time, and we hope that you will pay attention to the discussions there.
大きく2つのテーマで日本改革のビジョンをお話ししました。暮らしでも平和でも希望が見える日本への改革。この改革の道をどんな困難があろうとも多くの国民の皆さんと共に切り開く。この決意を述べてスピーチを終わります。ありがとうございました。
I spoke today about my vision for reforming Japan on two main themes. These are reforms for Japan where people will be able to see hope for both their lives and for peace. I therefore end my speech by expressing my determination to work together with the many people of Japan to pave the way for these reforms, no matter the difficulties.
Thank you very much, Chairman Tamura-san, and very powerful statement. We'd like to open the floor to Q&A. Please raise your hand and proceed to the front mic and state your affiliation for you ask the question. Tokyo Shimbun. Tokyo Shimbun.
Thank you very much. My name is Nishimura Freelance. Let me ask in Japanese. 日本語で伺います。先ほどのお話の中で、裏金事件に関して自民党に政権担当の資格ないということで、共産党は自民党、公明党、連立政権に代わる政権を目指すんだと思いますけれども、いつ どのような形の政権を目指すのかお話しいただきたいと思います。そしてネット見ますと、田村委員長以前、その場合には閣内協力を目指すという話をされたようなものも見ましたけれども、閣内協力、党として閣内協力を目指すのか、でその場合、田村委員長は、もし可能であれば、どの大臣ポストを希望しますか。お願いします。
My name is Nishimura Freelance. I have two questions. One is about the issue of the political slush funds that was mentioned, and you mentioned that the LDP is not qualified to be in government in regards to this. So I would like to ask if you could speak specifically about your vision of when and how you see ending their government and taking on the government in their place. The second part of the question is that you have also mentioned previously that you think it would be feasible or possible to have cooperation with other parties within the cabinet. I'd like to ask your thoughts about what position or what ministerial position you would see yourself taking on in such a future cabinet.
はい、まずいつということですが、これは次の総選挙がやはり今の与党をですね、できる限り少数に追いやる、やはり政権交代につながるような選挙にしていかなければならないと考えています。
As to the first question of when, I think that at the next opportunity of a general election, this is when opposition parties in Japan need to be able to work together to see how to ensure can take as many seats as possible in order to come close to a change in government.
そして私たち2021年の総選挙の時に市民と野党の共闘で政権交代ということを掲げましたが、これは1回でできなくともチャレンジし続けなければならない政権交代への道だと考えていますので、やはり市民の要求をバックとした野党の共闘、連立野党の、が力を合わせた、政権を作っていくということを目指していきたいと思います。
At the time of the 2021 general election, we also held up the slogan of a change in government through cooperation with the citizens and the opposition parties. While that was not successful at that time, this is also not something just for one occasion. This is a challenge which we must continue keeping forward as we go as well. Therefore, the change to actually succeeding a change in the government is this kind of cooperation with the requests or the calls of the citizens at the back supporting and the opposition parties collaborating.
それでその政権の中に日本共産党が入るのかどうかですけれども、これ今私が閣内もあるような発言というのは、おそらく2015年に行われた日本記者クラブでの講演で記者の方からの質問で出されたものかというふうに思います。
And as for the question about what role the JCP would play in such a government, and including the cabinet there as well, I believe that the comment you've referred to was perhaps a response I made to a question from a member of the media at a talk I gave in 2015 at the Press Club of Japan, perhaps?
やはりどのような政権をというのは、政党同士の信頼を持った、共闘の意思と信頼を持った話し合いが必要になってきますので、今この場でどのような政権というのをお答えできるものを私たちはまだ到達点をつかんでいません。
And as to what kind of government that would be, the composition of this is something which would need to be decided based on the will and trust of the different parties involved there as well. So as to whether I could make a respond on the specifics of that, that is not a point which we have yet reached as our party.
今の私たちの到達点は、政党同士が共闘の意思を確認をし合い、そして何の政策で一致して、政治を変えるのかということを国民に示すこと、まずこの段階に来ています。まずここは問われる段階です。
The point which we have reached at the moment where we are standing now is looking at if we are able to confirm the collaboration between the different opposition parties, that we will come together in this struggle as well to look at what policies we would be able to hold common in this regards in order to change the politics here in Japan, and how to demonstrate or express this to the people. That's the point now where we are standing.
野党の共闘が進むように全力で頑張っていきたいと思いますので、もしも大臣になったらというお答えはちょっと答えがしにくいところですね。現時点ではちょっと想定が難しいところかというふうに思います。
So now I hope to make all efforts towards ensuring that we can have this kind of collaboration between the opposition parties towards standing together and having together as an opposition force at the time of an election. So as for the question of what kind of ministerial role I would take on, that's something which is a little bit difficult to imagine, therefore, to respond at this point now.
しかし大臣になろうとなるまいと、私は今お話しした特にジェンダー平等と、そして子どもの権利ということにはこだわって国会議員として仕事をしてきましたので、この分野で大いに力を発揮していきたいと思います。
However, before speaking of any specific ministerial role, two issues which I have held are very much dedicated to during my time as a member of the Diet are the issues of gender equality, as mentioned, and also the rights of children. And so these are two areas where I would like to put all of my efforts and capacity toward.
今日の記者会見ありがとうございます。ラジオフランスおよびリベラション新聞の特派員で西村と申します。よろしくお願いします。今の状況を見ると、やっぱり自民党の支持率が、いくら下がっても、野党の支持率はあまり上がらない。その理由はどう分析しているのか、また共産党の議員たちは、国会でもテレビでも討論会でもまともなことを言うと思う日本人は結構多いと思うんですけれども、それでも選挙の時に共産党の候補者に、投票しないということもあると思うんですが、それもどう分析しているのでしょうか。よろしくお願いします。
My name is Nishimura of Radio France and Libération. I would like to ask, when we look at the situation today, we see that even as support rates for the LDP may be falling, this does not necessarily correlate with an increase in support rates for the opposition parties here in Japan. First of all, how do you analyze or look at this fact? And the second point, I believe that there are many people, many citizens in Japan who feel understanding or support the different voices or policies which are expressed, for example, by members of the JCP on television, in debates in the parliament, and so on as well. However, support for their policies in this sense doesn't necessarily correlate for them actually voting for them at the time of elections. So we could ask for your analysis on this point also.
今野党の支持率が上がらない、これは政治が変わるとなかなか思えないというのが多くの国民の現状だと思います。
As for why the support rates of the opposition parties is not necessarily increasing, I think that this is because the majority of people, or many people here in Japan, don't see that politics itself is actually going to change.
しかし一方でですね、国民の中の要求は大変強いものになっています。
However, at the same time, the demands of the people are becoming something very strong.
例えば、3月8日国際女性デーには、今結婚すれば同性が強制されていると。で、選択的夫婦別姓をどうしても実現してほしいということで、大変幅広い経済界の方も含めて、国会で要請行動を行うという変化が起きています。
One example of this was on March 8th, the International Women's Day. There is a situation now in Japan where legally after marriage there is no option to select to have different family names for the two married people that one of them needs to take on the same name. However, there was a very enormous and also broad, widely diverse movement demanding a change in this held at the Diet on International Women's Day, which included even participation from the business world.
同性婚を求める動きも全く同じで、どちらもですね、妨害しているのは自民党だというのが共通認識になっています。
And the same can be said also for the issue of same-sex marriage. And there is a broadly held common understanding that it is the LDP who is obstructing both of these issues.
そして力強いことに、そういう市民たちがそれでは選挙で結果を出して私たちの要求を実現しようという声も上げています。
And what is very encouraging there, very strong, is that we are seeing more and more voices from the people saying, well, if the way that we need to have a change there is to have change in elections in order to implement this policy, then let's work towards realizing that.
同じような動きをあらゆる要求の中で作っていきたいと思っています。
I hope that we can build up similar movements in a range of different issues and different demands as well from now.
若者たちは高すぎる大学の学費で苦しみ、 社会に出ても奨学金という名の借金を担わされて返済にも苦しんでいる、こういう一つ一つの要求を政治を変える力にぜひ結びつけていきたいと考えています。
For example, young people are suffering of having to pay university fees, tuition fees, which are much too high. And then even after they graduate and go out into the working world, in order to suffering also to repay what are called scholarships, but what are actually in fact loans. These kind of situations, I think that if we can have more and more voices demanding change in this, this is a way that we can also change the politics in order to do so.
こんにちは。ピーター・モリスと申します。私は弁護士とアジアタイムズの記者。普通にはミャンマーについて書きますけど、これから日本について書こうと思ってて、英語で聞いてもいいですか？ Sorry. So you have to. Well, first of all, I'm really glad you came here, and I really like your progressive policies. I consider myself a kind of progressive person, so. But I want to ask you about diversity and gender issues, since you're very interested in that. Under the previous JCP president, Mr. Xi, he did not use the Seki Hairitsu system in lower house elections, which often meant that popular, often female candidates were artificially denied seats in favor of more senior party figures. So would you consider changing this policy in order to sort of dismantle the seniority systems inside your own party? And one example of this being Saori Ikeuchi, who was sort of shut out via this system. And then another thing I wanted to ask is how are we going to increase the number of female leaders in Japan? I was at a female lawyers event, and they were saying, well, one problem is that they need more training, and then another problem is for whatever reason, a lot of women are not willing to sort of put their hat in the ring and step up. How do you think we can encourage more women to sort of step up and take leadership positions? And I guess maybe this requires some kind of social change. What kind of social changes do you think are necessary for that?
Sorry, what was the name of the system that you mentioned first? Seki Hairitsu. ピーター・モリスと申します。2点ほど質問があります。まず本日ここでお話をしていただきありがとうございます。非常に進歩的な政策のご説明、非常に私にも響くものがたくさんありました。まず一番最初の質問なんですけれども、多様性、そしてジェンダーについての質問なんですが、以前、志位委員長の時に日本共産党が惜配率制度の下で、例えば女性の選挙の時の女性の候補者が、もっと党の中では長い経験を持つ男性の人たちによって、立候補ができないですとか、選挙の時に投与されない男性の候補者の方が優先されるというようなことが以前あったと思います。池内沙織さんがその一つの例として挙げられると思うんですけれども、その以前の政策を今後変えていくようなことを選挙において考えられているのかというのが一つ目の質問です。そして二つ目の方が政治の世界よりもう少し広い質問なんですけれども、日本の中でどうやって女性のリーダーの数を増やしていくことができるのかということです。最近女性の弁護士が集まる会に参加をしたんですけれども、その時、その女性の弁護士たちが話していたこととしては、まず一つトレーニングがもっと必要ではないか、トレーニングですね、女性のリーダーを増やしていくためには。そしてもう一つは、その女性がなかなかそういったリーダーシップのポジションに立とうとしないというような状況が日本にあるのでしょうか。女性たちがもっとリーダーシップ、リーダー的な役割を自らもやりたいというふうに思えるような社会をどういうふうに作っていくことができるのか、そのために社会の変化などは必要なのでしょうか。その女性のリーダーシップの全体的な一般的な質問です。
まず私たちの選挙での女性の候補者の位置づけですけれども、これは比例代表の順位でですね、ブロックが11の地域ブロックに分かれるんですけれども、その中では女性1位でつけてるブロックがいくつもあるんですね。 まずそこまで。
So first of all, as to our party's system of the ordering of candidates at the time of the election, I believe that the question was probably referring to the proportional situation there as well. And then when we look at the regional blocks, there are 11 regional blocks, of which there are several where a female candidate is ranked as number 1 within that block.
努力の過程の中にありますが、これまでも積極的に女性の候補者を増やし、女性の議員を増やそうという努力はしてきました。さらにその努力を強めたいと思っています。
There are efforts already underway which need to be gone forward more as well, which we will continue to do to first of all increase the number of female candidates at the time of election, and then in turn to also increase therefore the number of female Diet members as well.
次の総選挙では東京のブロックの比例の第1位は私が立ってですね、東京で多くの得票を得て女性議員含めて多くの当選者を目指していこうと思っています。
So in the next general election, I am also ranked as the number 1 candidate within the Tokyo proportional block, Hide block there as well. And so through these kind of methods, we hope to look at both increasing the number of women standing at the time of election, therefore the number of women Diet members as well. So these are the efforts which are underway.
そして日本全体の女性のリーダーということですけれども、やはり日本の中に長くですね、男尊女卑のやはり文化的な要素も含めて、ジェンダー不平等が、社会全体に浸透していました。これを払拭していく努力はやはり男性にも女性にも求められていると考えます。
And as to the overall leadership of women within Japanese society, we have the situation where for a very long period of time, there is also this cultural elements of the male superiority or male-centered situation here, which has led to this inequality overall in society, gender inequality there as well. In order to eradicate this, there needs to be efforts on the parts of both men and women.
そうですね。今女性の側の努力もという声がありましたけれども、一つはですね、やはり家庭的責任があまりにも今も女性に重く負わされている現実が日本の中にあります。これを政治の力でやはり解決していくことは、女性のリーダーを増やしていく上ではどうしても必要なことになります。
And as to what kind of efforts are required for this, there was a mention, for example, on things women can do in order to be more willing to take on these kind of roles. But the reality of one thing which does need to be resolved in order to have a change in this is looking at the very heavy burden of familial responsibility which is placed on women within Japan at the moment. That is the reality that much of this burden and responsibility is placed on women. Therefore, there needs to be political efforts to resolve this in order to create the kind of situation where women can take on more leadership roles.
日本全体がもう少しゆとりある働き方になっていかなければ、やはり女性にとってはですね、生理も含めて女性が担っているその生理、妊娠、出産、そして子どもが小さい時の育児など、ここをですね、社会全体でサポートしていく体制というのを作っていくことが、女性リーダーを増やしていくために不可欠の要素だと考えます。
And so looking at overall, for example, having more or better working conditions in Japan, having more space, more openness there as well, and looking at the kind of physical elements which are placed on women in society when it comes to menstruation, pregnancy, childbirth, child-rearing, and so on. There needs to be more efforts to ensure that there is more social support for women in these kind of elements as well. This is something which is fundamental to creating the kind of society in which women can take on more leadership.
そして意識の改革も必要です。私自身も日本共産党の委員長にと、いうことをですね、自分自身が決断していくには、やはりそうですね、決断、この道を歩むんだと、自分の今の成長の段階では力が足りないかもしれない。だけどその力を周りの協力も得ながら伸ばしていくことができると。そこに挑戦していくんだという思いで、この今の日本共産党の委員長という、責務を担っています。
And there does also need to be a change in awareness as well, of course. Even for myself in taking on the role as the chair of the JCP, for me to make the decision that I was able to do this was something that needed a firm decision to go down this path as well. Of course, perhaps I may have had questions as to did I have enough capacity for taking this on, or what kind of growth was needed there. However, being able to take the decision to do so and to think about how to continue to grow, how to expand together with the support of those around and take on this challenge was a decision required in order to take on this role as chair of the party.
ですから多くの女性の皆さんにもやはり呼びかけたいですね。決断と挑戦をしてみようじゃないかと。そしてそれを支える周りのスタッフも必要だと。これをですね、やっぱいろんなところで実現していきたいなと思っています。
And so I would really like to appeal to the many women who may be listening as well that what is needed here, or appeal for them to take on a decision and to take on a challenge, and to also ensure that there is a support of those others, people and staff around them as well. And this is something which I would like to be able to realize in many different fields.
Go ahead, Fred.
Fred Varco, freelance. Two questions. One, why do you want to be called the Communist Party, considering that your philosophies don't seem to be in alignment with traditional communist thinking? And also, the communists are associated with probably the two worst genocides of the 20th century. So it seems odd that you haven't changed the name from the Communist Party. Secondly, you talked about a new political system and working with other opposition parties. But in the past, I think the Communist Party has sort of stepped aside from the other opposition parties and hasn't worked well together with them. So what kind of changes do you see on that front?
フレッド・バーコフリーランスです。2点ほど質問があります。まず一つは日本共産党の名称についてなんですけれども、今政策のご説明を伺って、必ずしも伝統的な共産主義の政策というよりも違った内容になっているかと思いますので、その日本共産党という名称を今でも維持している理由についてお願いします。もう一つやはり共産主義というものは20世紀に行われた最もひどいジェノサイド、虐待、大量虐殺の、加害側とも連想されるということもありますので、その名称を変えていないということが私にとって少し不思議なんですけれども、それについてのコメントをお願いします。そして2つ目の質問ですが、スピーチの中では他の野党との協力についてのご発言も先ほどありましたが、過去を見ますと、日本共産党が必ずしも他の野党との近い協力をしていた、少し距離を置いていたような印象もあるんですけれども、今後どのようなことを書いていこうとされているのか、もしあればお願いします。
はい、ありがとうございます。日本共産党は今日本に求められている改革は民主主義革命だと、それは日米軍事同盟を破棄して真の独立国になること、そしてお話しした経済のですね、人権尊重のシステムを作るということ、これがまず日本に求められている改革だと考えています。
So first of all, as the JCP, the reform that we believe is now required in Japan is what we could call almost a democratic revolution. We need to have a way to get rid of the US-Japan military alliance at the center and instead obtain real independence as a country. Also, in regards to the economy, we also need to change to an economy which respects human rights.
それは階段の一段です。その先の階段に社会主義共産主義を目指すということを綱領に明記しています。
That is the first step on the staircase that we see as the path forward for Japan. And beyond this first step is also looking towards aims which are socialist or communist in their thoughts, which is something that we have laid out in our party policy, our manifest.
この階段の一段一段は国民多数の意思で自覚で登るものだと考えています。
But we believe that taking these steps up this staircase as we go forward is something which will be done based on the decision or the will of the people of Japan.
日本の国民は誰も旧ソ連のような弾圧、 民主主義のない国を望んでいません。
Of course, no one in Japan is seeking a country such as the oppression which was seen under the former Soviet Union or a non-democratic regime.
私たちも社会主義と無縁のものが、ソ連の中で行われていた、ソ連の当時からですね、批判をしていました。
However, we, from that time under the Soviet Union as well, we were critical of what was happening, saying that what was happening there was not indeed actually socialism, that these things which are being implemented was indeed far from that. We were critical from then and still today.
私たちが目指す社会主義共産主義は、旧ソ連や東欧、あるいは今の中国とは全く違うものです。
The kind of socialism or communism which we are striving for is something completely different to the policies of the former Soviet Union or Eastern Europe or also China today.
これらの国々は発達した資本主義国を経ていません。
But these countries have not gone through the process of being a developed capitalist country before that.
しかもスターリンという誤った指導者によって抑圧社会があたかも社会主義であるかのようにソ連から他の国へと輸出されてしまいました。
And unfortunately, the policies of someone as wrong as Stalin, the oppressive regime there, was exported to other countries under the so-called name of socialism.
しかし日本は発達した資本主義国で豊かな生産力を持っています。
However, Japan is a developed capitalist society and it has also a very rich productive capacity here as well.
市場経済やそれからその経済を回す民主的なシステムというものも、労働者の戦いなどで構築されてきています。
Japan's market economy and the democratic systems which are in place through the efforts of the struggles of workers which have taken place to date.
そうした民主的なシステムをもっと発展させて、そして利潤第一主義というその資本主義を乗り越えるというのが私たちの目指す未来社会です。
The kind of future society which we are striving towards is looking at how to develop even further these democratic systems which are in place today, which are at work, and to develop this towards something even better.
今、気候危機や格差の拡大を見ても、資本主義でいいのかという問いかけは、多くの日本国民の中にも広がっています。
Now, with the climate crisis and the gaps between the rich and poor in Japan, there are many Japanese people who are also questioning the current capitalist system in which we are under.
この利潤第一主義から抜け出すという社会は、私たちは、労働時間が本当に短縮をされて自由な時間が持てるようになって、人間の全面的な、発達の自由が保障される社会だというふうに展望しています。
And we believe that rather than this interest-based society, what we need to be looking forward to, or this kind of future vision that we have, is somewhere by, for example, reducing the hours of workers, ensuring that they have their free time to use towards their own overall holistic development of people as well, and ensure that this freedom is guaranteed. This is the kind of future to which we are working towards.
お配りしました党大会の決定の、第4章にですね、そのことが詳しく書かれていますので、ぜひ資料としてもお配りしてないのかしら、お読みいただければというふうに思います。はい。
And there's more details about this written in a document which we thought was perhaps distributed today, but it seems it has not. But it is the documents which were adopted at the recent Party Congress, and the chapter 4 of that includes these policies in detail.
はい、時間が押してすみませんで、野党との関係ですけれども、先ほど市民の要求をバックにして野党と共闘するというふうに述べました。
And the second question in regarding the collaboration or cooperation with other opposition parties, I mentioned that this is to be done with the requests or the demands of the people, the citizens, pushing it forward or at its back.
その国民の要求の集中するものですね、核のなるものが何か、この裏金事件の問題、あるいは今軍事費が2倍ということで暮らしの予算も押しつぶされている。こういうですね、国民が切実に求める緊急的な課題で一致する野党とは大いに力を合わせて共に選挙を戦っていきたいと考えています。
And looking at the demands which people are feeling most urgent at the moment, focused on, for example, this issue of the political slush funds, the doubling of the military expenditure of Japan, the lack of space or the lack of comfort which people are having in their own economic challenges in their own livelihoods as well. These are urgent challenges which are felt by the people of Japan, and we hope to collaborate closely with all parties who share policies in regards to these urgent demands of the people.
I would like to ask a question. Sorry, it's very limited time, but I cannot help but ask them.
司会から最後に一つ質問させていただきます。
First question, you described LDP really strong one. You said it's an organized crime party. That's very powerful. I hope they don't, go to the court against this. But basically, you said the public rage is boiling, and the party has been getting away with scandals. Now they are more like support for having Foreign Minister Kamikawa to lead the LDP as according to the public surveys. Do you think Kamakura minister will be able to clean the LDP and get back good policies? And second question, very briefly, does your party support sanctions against Russia and North Korea? Thank you.
2点ほど質問です。まず1つ目、スピーチの中で自民党に対して、例えば今回のスキャンダルで組織的な犯罪ですとか、人々の怒りが沸騰しているというような表現があったかと思うんですけれども、このスキャンダルを背景に、今、世論調査によりますと、多くの市民は次の首相に上川大臣を支援されているというような世論調査の結果があるんですけれども、上川さんが首相になった場合には自民党をもっとクリーンな政党にすることは彼女にはできると思われますかというのが1つ目の質問です。そして2つ目の方が、日本共産党はロシア、そして北朝鮮に対する経済制裁をサポートしているかどうかということです。
はい、まず1点目ですが、やはり自民党である以上ダメだと思います。上川大臣であろうとも。で加えてですね、私は上川大臣に昨年イスラエルのガザ攻撃の問題で質問をしました。女性や子どもたちにどんなに悲惨な虐殺が行われているかということを示しても、彼女は当初、日本政府の態度として停戦という言葉さえ言わなかった。ハマスは非難するが、イスラエルに対して明確な非難をすることがありませんでした、昨年の時点で。こういう方がですね、やはり首相になったとしてもですね、私が指摘したアメリカ言いなり、アメリカの顔色を伺うという、この日本からの脱却はできないというふうに考えますし、この組織的犯罪を事実解明しようという動きをしていない以上、やはりクリーンな自民党に変えることもできないというふうに指摘せざるを得ません。それから、はい、
First of all, your question in regards to the LDP, I think as long as they remain the LDP, the party that they are, even if it were Ms. Kamikawa in charge, they would not be able to change. If we look at, for example, last year at the Diet, I posed questions to Ms. Kamikawa on the issue of Gaza at the time, about the suffering of women and children under the genocide which was being done there as well. However, her response, which is the stance of the Japanese government, did not even use the word ceasefire. She was critical of Hamas at the time, but did not have any kind of clear criticism of Israel and what Israel was doing as well. So as to whether such a person, if they were to become prime minister, would be able to change the politics and would break away from this mere blindly following the United States policies, I don't think that that would be the case. On the issue of the scandals as well, as long as the LDP is not bringing to light or making clear the facts about this organized crime, which they have been conducting as well, it is not going to be possible for them to become a clean LDP as well.
そしてロシアと北朝鮮の経済制裁について、日本共産党も賛成をしています。同時に、北朝鮮については特にこれ外交が全くない状態ですから、北朝鮮との外交をですね、やるべきだということを強く主張し、また提案もしてきているところです。
And the second question as to the sanctions, the JCP does support economic sanctions against Russia and North Korea. Particularly in regards to North Korea, there are no diplomatic efforts at all taking place as well. So we have been strongly promoting or advocating that there should be diplomacy or diplomatic efforts towards the North Korea.
ロシアに対しては、やはり国連憲章を守れの一点で、世界が連帯してウクライナの侵略戦争をやめさせるということが必要で、その上でも経済制裁ということは本当に真剣に取り組むことを他の国にも呼びかけるべきだと思います。
And as to Russia, we believe that what is most important is to ensure following of the United Nations Charter as well, and therefore working with other countries, or we're sharing the plans with other countries to end this invasion or the military invasion and war against Ukraine there as well. Economic sanctions are something, of course, relevant to this, and we are calling on other countries to also seriously follow the sanctions which are in place against Russia.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your giving us 3 more minutes. This wraps up our press conference. As a customer of our club, we would like to give you 1-year honorary membership. It's our honor if you come again to the press club, just hang around in the bar and talk with journalists anytime you like for 1 year. You are most welcome. And thank you very much. Thank you, everybody coming here, and also thank you for following us online, and have a nice evening.